welcome to today's Chief Value Officer session. Today we're talking about dashboarding and providing information to a business. To start off, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend the respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we commence. Today, if you have any issues, please click on the helpline or go through to the GoToWebinar slide. Sorry, I'm having an issue myself here. Whilst we are going through today, please do feel free to ask questions. If you put them into the chat, that would be great. And we want to have a free-flowing discussion. Sorry, I have a problem. Just give me one moment. Here we go. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen because I actually have some issues here. So apologies, everyone. My PowerPoint has decided to just stop today. Anyway, I'd like to welcome Fahim and Greg along today. Apologies that I haven't been able to go into the full slide deck there, but today we're going to be talking about dashboarding and how it can actually support businesses. Fahim, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Fahim Kandaka. I lead BDO's data and AI practice. I'm an accountant by background as well. I'm also a professor at UNSW in Sydney.
Thanks very much, Fahim. And Fahim and I work very closely together. Those of you who have been to a number of these Chief Value Officer webinars will probably find a friendly face there. Also, really happy to have Greg Norman join us from Forecast Global. Greg, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, Greg Norman. I run a financial modelling and data analytics consultancy called Forecast. We've worked side by side with BDO on a few projects now, and yeah, forming a nice relationship with both Nick and Fahim's teams. Where, despite the name Forecast Global, we're now Australia focused. We did have European and North American, but since moved out of that side of the business. So yeah, very much focus on financial modelling, data analytics through to data science. And thanks for the invite today, Nick.
Thank you very much. And looks like we've got our deck back up. Thank you very much, Stacey. So today we're going to be talking about dashboarding and looking at how do we actually add value to businesses with dashboarding. So to jump in, the first section that we look at here is that evolution of the CFO to the Chief Value Officer. So if we go to the next slide, please. So as part of this evolution, we're looking at where CFOs can really add value in their organisation. And it's around the future of the finance function. So effectively, we're looking at how do we build the finance function of the future. And you'll see there, we've released a lot of data with in conjunction with the ACCA to basically have a look at how do CFOs in particular drive value within their organisation. And we've done a number of different interviews with leading CFOs, going down to these definitive themes. So today we're really getting into the data and analytics, but also digital transformation, and then value add really comes through dashboarding, etc. So we'll jump into what is the purpose of dashboarding, the so what's, etc. But where I like to start here is I recently bought a Tesla, or it must have been about a year ago I bought a Tesla. Now the reason why I'm talking about a Tesla is because it's got a dashboard. All cars have a dashboard. That's where dashboard actually came from. Now, the reason why I'm showing this now is effectively what information do you need when you're driving a car? So the Tesla shows you a whole load of information. He likes to point out that I need to charge my car and I've got terrible taste in music here. But those two bits of information, the only one that's actually relevant when we're driving is actually I do need to charge my car there. What other bits of information are really, really necessary here? So having a look at the information that's been provided. I mean, the Tesla's got this nice little bit of radar which can show us where cars are, etc. around me. But effectively, I'll look around, I can look out the windows and I can get that information, can't I? It's showing me on a map where to go. Those of us who are old enough can probably remember the Gregories. You'd pick them up and you'd figure out where to drive. I was told somewhere, and I think recently that potentially we're actually becoming dumber because the maps in cars and GPS are actually taking away some of our cognitive function. It's showing us where to go. So if we think about the actual information you need, I think to the next slide, which is effectively, I went to New Zealand recently, and my father-in-law bought a 1951 Series 1 Land Rover. Now, if you have a look at the dashboard there, that is showing you precisely what information you need to drive that car. So it's got the speed, it's got the amount of petrol, it's also got the battery, which was really quite important back in those days. And then you'll see it's also got 4 lights. Those lights light up when there's a problem. So I can always open the hood and look at how much oil is in the engine. I can always understand all that information, but those lights are flashing when I need information. But at any given time, I don't necessarily need to know the oil level. I don't need to know the engine, how hot it is or how cold it is, etc. Those lights will flash when we need it. But the information I need when I'm actually driving, the speed, the petrol level, and here, as I said, the battery. So we might stop sharing that because I think I'll just jump in and start talking to both Fahim and Greg on these themes. Greg, we were speaking before around these themes, around the so what. So what about that information that's being provided? When you look at those two different slides, I mean, what do you think about from a dashboarding perspective when you're talking to clients? Sorry, it's a bit of a broad question, but
yeah, I think
get your first opinions.
Yeah, so I think really, I guess what you're saying is don't overload the audience with information that they don't actually need in order to make the decision that they need. So in the case of a driver, what information do you need to be able to drive safely and not run out of fuel and the likes? In business, there's obviously a lot of different users across the business of data. Someone in operations may need information on stock levels and what's happening within a manufacturing plant, for example. But someone in finance would have something a vastly different need, and all the way through to your exec and board. So it's really determining who the audience of that data is and what do they need to be able to do their job effectively and make decisions to do their job effectively.
That's really good. Fahim, do you have any comments around that? I know we've talked about this quite a fair bit, and you've seen those slides way too much.
Yeah, no, I really like those slides, not least because it reveals your taste in music. But yeah, no. Look, for me, I think the world of dashboarding, I mean, it's been around for more than 10 years now, right? So obviously the audience that's joined, we're not going to go down into the nitty-gritties of dashboarding, but I think the purpose, going back to the purpose of it, is really important. So Greg mentioned decisions being one. I'll probably add one more to that. We've kind of moved a little beyond decision to action as well. So, and the dashboard is one of the tools that helps us drive an action, right? The hardest thing for humans to do in an organization is to take action, it seems, because you don't have all the information you need, you don't have the confidence you need, and ultimately you might get blamed if it goes wrong. So I think a good dashboard will be one that helps drive whatever the action needs to be. And sometimes preventing action is an action itself if it's deliberate and intentional. So if your dashboard can show that, hey, don't do this, that itself is an action as well. So I think decision and action go hand in hand. And I think the goal should be, and Greg touched on this a little bit as well, different people will have different needs. In the world that I work in, quite often all those people are around the table at the same time though. and I'm having to convince all 5 of them to take a particular action for the good of the organization. And that's where the complexity comes in. I think it's a wicked problem that's got multiple facets, and I'm really glad we've got tools like data analytics tools and dashboards now, where if we design it well, we can articulate all those perspectives in one go, in one meeting, and hopefully leave the meeting with an agreed position that we're going to take an action. And that's sometimes a lot harder than people think it is.
I really like that as a concept. I mean, what is the purpose behind the dashboard? The dashboard is actually going to help people drive actions and behaviors. And basically, it helps us to all understand that we're all utilizing the same set of data. So we all understand the information. We all agree that that data set is what we're working from. I suppose there.
I love you've said that, but I think that's something we take for granted and we just assume that's true. But most of the time people are debating on the source of the data. Like, they don't mind that there's a dashboard up on screen that's showing sales are going like this. But most people are debating what went into that calculation to get to that graph in the first place. So yeah, so I know we're just talking about dashboards today, but what goes under the dashboard to get to the dashboard is a really important piece as well.
I think that's actually really important. I mean, when building a dashboard, Greg, I mean, the data sources are very important. We were sort of chatting about clean data versus dirty data before. And what's your foundational, what do you look for from a foundational perspective with the data sets? Because I think you and I have worked on some projects together where we've seen boards or execs come in and say, look, give me the dashboards, but realistically, you've got to do the boring stuff first. Dare I call the data cleansing boring?
Yeah, and often understanding where data is generated and housed, and then how to access that, and then inevitably, how do you get confidence that that data is going to give you a robust and accurate view. I mean, if you think about everyone would have seen dashboards in the past. That last, I'll say, 20% of the actual building the dashboard only is possible when you've identified where the data is housed and you've cleansed it. And all organizations will have anomalies in the data that become apparent when you make that information available to people. So yeah, if you think about sort of system generated data, so your ERP system, maybe your CRM, HRM, etc., is continually developing new information. So being able to tap into that. We'll talk later, I think, a little bit about what real time looks like and why is that needed, and in many cases it's not. But a lot of organizations still, I'll say actually all organizations are users of Excel and spreadsheets, and many probably have an over-reliance on that. And I think some of the work we've done together, Nick, is where a lot of that information and some of the manipulation of information sits within an Excel file. Dashboards can tap into that, and if you've got a discipline within an organization, you can make it work, but typically that's where the problems lie. You've taken out of your source data system into a tool where anyone can access and make changes, and now to rely on that in a dashboard can be problematic, and often that's where some of the issues lie.
And sometimes it goes the other way as well. So the dashboard gets it from the source system, but the business has been using someone's spreadsheet. So when they come to the meeting, they don't believe the dashboard because the spreadsheet has no calculations that hasn't been built into the dashboard as well. So there's a little bit of that. But I think without getting too far into the detail of data governance and data quality, I think the essence of what we're trying to say, though, is we're trying to build trust in the numbers, right? And that's probably really, really important. Now, whether you call that you need data cleansing for that, or data quality, or you need to review the process as to how the data got there, that's a whole field of study and work in itself. But for this conversation, I think the key output that we're looking for is trust, because if we go back to where we started this conversation, the goal is to enable a decision and enable action, right? And the people who need to make those decisions need to trust the numbers before they can make the decision. So whatever you need to do to build trust, build trust. I often find even saying things like this number could be wrong by plus or minus 20%, just openly starting with that and setting the expectation in the room that, look, we don't need an accurate number to make this decision. We just need something within a ballpark to see which direction it's headed so that we can make this obvious decision that we need to make. Great practical example. I've got a client who's got some funding left over for their financial year of about $5 million. And it's locked, 3 or 4 of that 5 million has to be spent on labor, it's locked in quarantine to people costs. Okay, so they can't just spend it on whatever they want. So $4 million, if we assume $100,000 a year per salary, that's about 40 people. Now, whether that number is right or wrong, they can safely hire at least 5 to 10 people right now, right? But I've got people, the decision makers are waiting for the perfect number. Is it 4 million? Is it 3.8 million? Is it 4.2 million? To approve 5 roles that the operations person has requested. And we're losing tons of money hand over fist while we hold on for this perfect data. So I found that just setting people that expectation, look, I've got a number up there. At the moment, the dashboard's saying 4 million. There's a bunch of nuances and spreadsheets galore. That number at worst case is going to be 2.5 million. You can approve 5 roles. It's 500 grand. Go, let's keep moving. That sort of conversation is really important as well.
I really like that. I've been talking a lot recently around culture-enabled finance and effectively looking at how do we actually drive culture through the finance team and then into the wider organization. And as part of that conversation, it is about taking leaders on a journey from different parts of the organization through things like the FP&A function to actually start saying, what are you getting? So if we're going to provide a flash report on day 1, or we're going to provide you with dashboards throughout the month, those are going to be directional. They're not going to be 100% accurate. And, you know, we talk about accounting because accounting becomes its interpretation. So are we applying the AASB standards, or are we applying some other interpretation to the numbers that people are receiving? And therefore, if we can get people on that journey and understanding what level of accuracy or what level of comfort they should have around those numbers, is it a directional number? Is it an approximate number? Is it highly accurate? I mean, there's going to be some numbers that we can get with high accuracy. But I think to your point for him, that's going to really drive a lot of that conversation. And that's actually a cultural piece within the organization. It almost has nothing to do, it has a lot to do with the data, because the data is intrinsically what we're utilizing, but it's getting people to understand that they're not going to get 100% accuracy.
I am convinced people don't want to make decisions and people don't want to take actions, because I reckon that's where responsibility comes in. So inherently, the human nature is to not make a decision. And society at large, we punish people for taking action and it goes wrong, whereas we don't punish people for not taking actions. If an opportunity passes you by, there's no evidence of it, there's no consequence, so you get away with it. So it's safer not to make a decision, right? So I'm convinced this data thing is this fallacy that exists where unless the data is perfect, I'm not making a decision. It's just this lovely layer of protection of delaying the decision and the accountability as much as possible. So if you are in the space where you're on the presentation side of the data and you are the one presenting the data, it's not just the data you present, it's the context in which you present it in and how you position it. To your point, Nick, about I think ranges are really important, consequence, understanding where it fits in, what the impact of it is. So if this data was wrong by a factor of 2, what difference would that make? If it's wrong by a factor of 10, what difference would that make? And the reality is it's usually wrong by plus or minus 10 or 20%. It's not wrong by magnitudes of 10, right? And so, yeah, so I think if the focus is to drive decisions and drive action, you need to do everything in your power to reveal as much as you can with the data and drive that culture of estimates are good enough if we need to be.
Yeah.
And it almost if you think about your Land Rover dashboard and the 4 warning lights, there's not a lot of information on that dashboard. But if one of those lights go off, then you know you need to act on something. So if you think about that when you're presenting data, is there thresholds that if they're triggered, it raises it as being an action item that doesn't go away until you've cleared that action item. And I think to your point, Pim, I agree. People don't like making decisions. They will avoid them unless you put it up front and you say this needs to be actioned, and everyone can see it. And until you've dealt with whatever it is, your production volumes are 30% below target this month. You've got 10 days of the month to go. You need to act now to be able to add another shift or whatever it is that's going to get you back in track.
That probably segues really nice. Sorry, Nick, I was just going to say that segues really nicely to another point. And because Greg just mentioned 30%, it kind of makes sense. We talk about data as if it's an insight, right? But there's an element to that which has a calculation. Or sorry, we talk about data as a fact, like it's a matter of fact, here's a number, or here's a stat, right? Whereas what we really need to start moving to is the model component of it, or the calculation component of it. And that's why, as Greg mentioned too, Greg's got his own consultancy and we work quite closely with him. And the reason I work so well with Greg is he was one of the very few people I met who understood how to take a stat to the model, to the decision. So what I mean by that is if your sales numbers are down by 30% and your dashboard shows that, what I really would love is to show what the profit impact of that is on the dashboard as well. So somebody needs to do the calculation of sales going down by 30% means we can't recover X% of our fixed costs. However, we should be able to reduce our variable costs. So our total profit doesn't go down by 30%, it goes down by 22%. But somebody has to do that calculation. That's the modeling bit. And ultimately, it's a decision you need to make. Then going, okay, what am I going to do about my fixed costs if sales are dropping by 30%? And ultimately, that's where we want to get to, right? But there's a data component, but there's a modeling, or we can call it calculation or some other thing. There's a component that's of analysis of that data that often gets missed. And I think a good dashboard will do that bit for the person rather than just give them a bunch of stats and then they'll have to do the calculations and the analysis in their head. You want that analysis to hit them in the face so that they can make the decision and the action that they need to take.
I think that's really good. And I think from the perspective, rewinding a little bit back to people don't want to make decisions. There is I'm going to talk about my father-in-law now, I'll talk about my mother-in-law, but she's a great person saying, do nothing wrong. So that goes to your point for him about people don't want to make decisions because if I make a decision, then I might do something wrong. Everyone has organized an event in their life, and anyone who has organized an event in their life has probably come up against the people who come up and say to you, I don't like that, or I've got this problem with it. No one actually wants to fix it or put their hand up to actually do anything about it. So, I don't like that venue. Well, great. Like, let's not go there, but you organize something else. Everyone's got that friend, right? But so if you're not doing anything, or you're not given the space to do anything, or you're given the space to fail quickly, I think there's a great conversation we've had, and for him and I have actually had this with Victor Dominello, the old Services New South Wales minister. He talked about dragging the RTA in New South Wales, Roads and Traffic Authority, into, he jokes about it being the 20th century, not even the 21st century. And basically creating in an industry or a space where, failure is seen as really, really bad. So he talks about having the biggest startup in Australia and that culture of fast fail, etc. So I think I'm trying to drive it back to culture enabling these mechanisms. The data and the dashboards are helping people to make the decisions, and then the so what. To that point, Greg, when we're actually building up these data models, and to Pim's point, how do you make those connections between the data, the information, and then the decision? Like, what do you look at from that perspective? And how do you get people to go on that journey?
Yeah, and again, it depends on the audience. I think your management need to understand throughout the organization who needs to see what information to be able to make decisions on running the business. So someone in an operations area might need far more timely data. It could be as little as by the second or by the minute, certainly by the day. Whereas someone at the board probably doesn't need to see that that level of granularity. As I said, if you are showing data that has a couple of things. One is the relevant data for that user, and the level of granularity that's required. Typically, you want to bring up the 4 or 5 key items, KPIs, to say, look, this is what it's kind of in your face. And then where you do have charts or tables of data, the idea is that they should support those KPIs, and where you do see an issue, you should be able to drill down to find where the issue sits. But at a high level, you keep an eye on those KPIs. We talk about having those thresholds. Now, they need to be understood and decided across the business what those thresholds are, that then spit out some call it alerts or warnings and actions resulting from those. And I think for him, to your point, people don't like making decisions, so sometimes you've got to lead people towards that. So a decision needs to be made, and it's got your name next to it. So I think that's really key. It's very easy to organise things, to ignore things where it's not front of mind. So work out what's important and just make it front of mind.
Yeah, I love showing them the consequence of no decision as well now in the model.
Yeah.
So just say if we keep going the way we are and make no decision, this is the lost opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Which is hard because it's an opportunity that's lost, that's not guaranteed, and people don't like, oh yeah, that's fine, that's just an opportunity I lost. It did no harm, but that is a harm in my view. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. To that question you just asked, Nick, I think that's where the finance function and the CFO has a really amazing privileged position. And both Greg and I have finance backgrounds, and we've both come into data from a finance background rather than a technical background. And so we've got this, both of us have this really commercial mindset of making profit, right? Ultimately. And I know, and if you're not in a, if you're in a not-for-profit or a government organization, it's financial sustainability, financial viability. So it's efficiencies and value, let's just say, right? So everything you do has to either generate revenue or reduce costs. And that if you just focus on those two things while improving quality, like obviously not compromising, it's easy to reduce costs by just putting low quality stuff. I'm not suggesting, in a sensible world, it has to be linked to commercial drivers of either revenue or expenses, right? And that's probably where the CVO, the Chief Value Officer concept that we're working with in BDO comes in, right? Where the finance function has this really privileged position of understanding value drivers of an organization across no matter whether it be in operations, whether it be in marketing, whether it be in HR, whether it be anywhere, production, sales, whichever area. The finance business partner and finance function as a whole has this really privileged position where we get to see everything. And I think this is where analytics and dashboarding and messaging together comes in really, really well, where if we build the right dashboard, we can show people at an integrated level or at a business unit level saying, hey, these are the 5 steps that generate revenue for you, or these are the 5 decisions that generate expenses for you. If we move step 3, and if we just reduce step 3, or we change the timing of step 3, so you place an order, place it 2 weeks earlier than you normally do, our profits will go through the roof. Like those are the sorts of insights and dashboards that really add value. If you can do it well.
I really like that. And remember, everyone, if you do have any questions, please submit them in the chat box, and we will answer them. But I really do like that viewpoint. I worked with a quick service restaurant, and we did some analysis, and basically we helped them build out dashboards effectively to look at the business from the perspective of when are your peak times and busy times, how is your staffing matching that? And we were able to say, look, you are starting 3 staff members at 9 a.m., for instance, in this store, but realistically, that's one too many. You can start one of those staff members a bit later. And yes, in one store, that might be 2 hours of their time, but then it was multiplied across a series of 50 stores every day. That was 100 hours of time every day, 7 days a week, 700, that was 700 hours per day, per week that we were starting to save in time that was basically wasted because those staff members weren't necessarily needed there. The other thing in this store was we actually started overlaying other data sets, like things like bringing in weather. So if it's a hot day, what are people buying? If it's a cold day, what are people buying? And how do we prep for that? And looking at the weather forecasts. So all of a sudden we're taking the dashboards, we're providing them to the store managers. We're saying, look, this is how your rostering should work better if you have a look at it. We're also going to, okay, what does the forecast look like this week for the next 7 days? What are we ordering and getting ready for? And so it was a really interesting exercise. And it was how do we provide that information? So when we're bringing those multiple data sets together, I think there's some really big, powerful information. But at the first stage, we needed to understand, and Greg, I'd like to get your sort of view on this. We needed to actually get that baseline of what did our sales look like, what did our rostering look like, and also what did our sales look like, and then overlay a different set of data, i.e. going to the BOM, the Bureau of Meteorology, and getting the weather data, and then mapping what actual individual sales were occurring. So when you're bringing those kind of data sets together and then dashboarding them, I mean, what do you look for in terms of those business drivers?
Yeah, look, and I think we're starting to get into, I'll call it the analytics and even predictive analytics with that. But if you are looking in QSR is a great example of something that moves quickly. If you think about what drives profitability in a QSR, obviously the sales at the front end, and then it's usually labor, materials, and rent, probably in that order. So labor being the key issue, that if you're looking for profitable business, labor is really the key one that you want to get right from a cost point of view. And we've worked in similar industries where not only do you use that to set rostering to see what does it normally look like on a Monday from 9 till 12. Does that change if it's a public holiday? Does it change if it's a school holiday, etc.? But also then giving real-time data to say it's 11 o'clock now on a Monday morning, and our sales are 50% what we expected. Can we actually let someone go home early and get to a point where obviously you've got to work within the rules of rostering and awards, but where you can you actually optimize on the go? Now, if you learnt that information tomorrow instead of right now, the opportunity to act is gone. There's a group that we've worked with, and that's exactly what they do. They take your point of sale information, and they're just continually updating to say what staff do we actually need on tonight. Throughout the day in a restaurant or late at night in a bar, can you actually drop some of those the labor that you've got to improve profitability? I think in terms of your predictive, I think that's really important as well. So rostering, food ordering. If you think from your top line on sales, one of the worst things you can do is stock out so that you don't have that item to sell anymore, and that sale is often completely lost, or it's downsized to another product. So if you run out of ice creams on a hot day, then it's not like someone's buying a pie instead. Your ability to see, based on what's happened in the past, what's likely to happen when you do have a forecast, like a weather forecast, I think is really key for planning as well.
I'll just put one warning out there for those things, though. Don't forget about unintended consequences. So there's a wonderful economist on TikTok and everywhere named Rory Sutherland, and he does these amazing videos on consequences of decisions. And he talks about consultants coming into a high-end hotel and looking at the doorman and saying, you don't need a doorman anymore. And next thing you know, you save whatever, 50, 100 grand for the doorman salary. But then before you know it, your high-end hotel is no longer a high-end hotel and you've lost millions of dollars for the sake of 50 grand. So always flip on the other side as well, the consequences of that. So in that staffing situation, messaging, and there's a huge change management piece on those things as well, just as a warning as well. Having said that, I think I love the productivity side of things as well. Like if you can, so rather than clean cut, oh, you don't need a staff member there, it's you've got excess capacity. What can you do with that excess capacity is the really less controversial and really insightful opportunities there if you can free it up. And if you do it right, it's only upside, because then the staff enjoy their work more because it's more meaningful and you get the bottom line impact as well, which is probably worth just considering.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Rory Sutherland. He comes across with a lot of good content. I don't know if he's an economist though. I think he's a marketer, but he's really good.
He's an economist. Okay.
anyway, but no, I think the point there is actually really good. I'm going to use another one of his examples because I think it was really good in terms of, I think the UK spent billions and billions of pounds trying to make the Eurostar faster, and they did it by 15 minutes or something like that. And he said, I could have spent that same money and just made it better, and people would ask you to go slower. So it was, for the fraction of the cost. So I think I get that point. It's kind of think about what you're trying to do. So a lot of this data is really useful. But again, what is the purpose of the brand? So what is the purpose that we're trying to drive here? And I think that's what we're all trying to get to. Now, I do know that some people will be really interested in platforms, etc. So I thought we'd spend a little bit of time on that. I know that there's people who love Power BI, there's Tableau, there's a couple of different platforms out there. Greg, you actually referred to Excel. Excel is actually a platform as well that we could utilize. You could create dashboards in Excel. I probably wouldn't do that personally, but go for your life. Do you have any opinions on platforms? I know it's a bit of a fraught question because it's going to be horses for courses here, but I know that's maybe a question that people are asking.
Yeah, let's start with Excel because everyone understands it, and I agree with you. For real-time dashboarding, Excel's not really the right tool. But if you're wanting to do a monthly report and you ingest your GL data and a bunch of financial and non-financial data, then Excel can actually do a perfectly reasonable job. When you're wanting to get into a bit more, I'll call it sort of data integrity in real time, then platforms like Power BI and Tableau and QuickSight and the likes are designed in a way where, yes, you need to have some skills in the same way that you get strong Excel users and strong system users. But generally speaking, you don't need to be an expert in data analytics to be able to use some of these tools. They're designed in a way that are fairly user-friendly, and equally, if you're the audience, it can be displayed on your phone or on your desktop or your tablet, and the system itself should be relatively intuitive, but the dashboard design should also be relatively intuitive, so the user doesn't feel afraid to use it. It becomes part of their daily or weekly or monthly activities. The ERPs like SAP and Odoo and the likes are now bringing in their own dashboarding modules. Some of those I've been working with a product called Infor recently, and they're hosted on AWS, and I can see effectively their dashboard is the QuickSight dashboard. It's the same functionality. So I think you're starting to see that being brought into ERP programs now. Particularly, obviously, a lot of your company data is flowing through your ERP, but a lot of those systems now also have data warehouses or data lake modules where you're feeding other information in there, and now you've got one source of information that your dashboard is drawing from. Then you've got, I'll call it bespoke dashboards that might be built into a particular software element, and it's more your kind of your front end design. And I think, Nick, we've talked about the Vinalytics dashboard and putting wine consumer data into a dashboard. But that's something where you've got a data set and you can create your own dashboard. You need some front end development skills, and that's where you start to get into more technical skills there. But I think likes of Power BI, it's a Microsoft product which gives people some trust and familiarity. It seems to have captured most of the market here in Australia. I'd say in Europe and other places, Tableau probably got the jump, and Power BI is still playing catch up. In many ways, I think Australia was a bit late to the party on dashboards, and by that stage, Power BI was as good, if not better. So it seems to be have the market share here.
I think what I'm taking out of that is, and it was a really interesting conversation I had with a sort of CFO the other day, was use what's appropriate for your business. They were asking me about whether or not there was an application. It was a little bit different use case here, but it was effectively, is there an application that can do this set of tasks that I needed to do? And at the end of the day, after a half an hour conversation, we landed on, well, actually, you can do it all in Excel. And there are applications out there, but you're going to have to train a new team, your team members, you're going to have to go through this process. It's not a massive thing that you're trying to achieve here, and Excel will do the job. So once it starts becoming a massive job, maybe let's have a look at the application. But right now, Excel is doing the job. So to your point, Greg, I think that was a really good point. If it's a month-end report, you kind of got one trial balance or one GL coming in, you're not really doing a consolidation or anything like that. You're just trying to pull out some information to provide so that Excel will be great. When we're starting to get into more real-time data, and I think this is going to be probably the next part to talk about, you touched on this, that's maybe where the dashboards are starting to get more sophisticated and the information flowing through. Fahim, do you have any opinions or thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple. So the first one is Power BI as a tool. It's so easy from a front-end drag and drop capability perspective. So if you're using Excel in an advanced way, I genuinely think it's worth making the investment of just learning to use Power BI. You'll pick it up in one. It's like the graph function of Excel, realistically. That's all it is, right? But just 200 more graphs. Everything's built in. The interactions between graphs are default. So you literally load your data in the same format you would for a pivot table. You just put that in, and then you drag 3 graphs together, and all the graphs interact with each other automatically. Now, if you were going to do that in Excel, and I was an Excel power user myself, and I always threaten my data team that if they take too long, I'm just going to do it in Excel. But if you were going to do that in Excel, you'd be spending time setting up the graphs, setting up the relationships between the graphs. It wouldn't quite like filter the way Power BI is set up to. So they've done all the heavy lifting. Microsoft has sat with the focus groups and done all that for you. They probably copied Tableau, to be fair, but and they've just done that. And I've been on this dashboarding journey for the last 15 years, right? And so when we started, we were using Tableau and Spotfire. Power BI came out. It was rubbish for about 6-7 years, and then before we knew it, it was just as good, if not better, and easier. And all our clients had it, so it was just easier to pivot. So we went from having 13 licenses of the other products, a very mix of everything, to none. So now I don't have a single license of the other one. All my clients are on Power BI. I buy the others by exception. But yeah, so that one layer of exception. If you're using Excel to do more than just do the calculation bit, but you're spending a lot of time creating graphs and laying out the graphs, do that in Power BI would be my recommendation. Connect it live to your Excel file, do all the calculations, do everything in Excel, and then that final data set, just load that up into Power BI, make it a live connection if you can, and just do your graphing in Power BI would be my suggestion, right? But then the flip side of it, same with Power BI. The moment you start doing calculations in Power BI and not just graphing and visualizations, that's when you start getting into trouble, in my view. Okay, like that's when you start creating opaque things and things like that. So what we end up recommending is that data comes from source systems or external systems like weather data, like you gave, Nick. So your ERP, your finance system, your HR systems, your CRM, those 4 systems, ideally, you pull it all into a central repository of sorts, and that could be an Excel file if your volumes are low enough. Wherever you need to pull it into, pull it in somewhere central, do all your calculations in that central repository, and then that output of your calculations, load that into Power BI, and try and minimize how much calculations you do on the dashboarding platform. Do most of your calculations in a calculation engine, whether that be Excel or a SQL database or Microsoft Fabric platforms or an Amazon Databricks platform. The more you go up those ranks, the more training and expertise you need. So keep it simple first, do it in Excel if you need to. But personally, I love the front end of a Power BI dashboard for a couple of reasons. One, it's far easier to drag and drop and do analysis, even with a basic, like I took 10 rows of data for each state. So I had a P&L, a profit and loss statement, just 10 rows. And I did it state by state. And the only other thing I uploaded to it was just the population of each state. And the amount of analysis we could do just on that alone to compare each state's performance against another, and then look at revenue per population and things like that, it was enough to encourage significant discussion among those states, right? But if I were to do that in Excel, which I could, I would spend a ton of time building those graphs, which I didn't have to. So that was probably the only nuance for me.
That's a really interesting one, and you've actually hit upon a question for me, is when do we transfer from being general finance or accountants to needing data scientists or engineers within the finance team? I don't know who wants to field that question first.
You can have a go, Greg. I've got a very clear view on that.
And I think it's something you said earlier, for him, if you've got call it a super user or a strong user of Excel, those skills should translate fairly well to an intuitive dashboarding tool like Power BI. There is a slightly different language within Power BI, the DAX language, but I mean a half day or full day workshop and you'll learn enough to be able to start using Power BI. I think where you're getting, if you're needing to connect to data sources through APIs or others and needing to write some script to do that, it's interesting. All these systems where the data is generated and housed say, yes, we've got an API for that. It'll be easy, simple integration. Those words, simple integration, I've learned to become wary of that. But generally, yeah, you might need some data analytics skills to be able to write those queries. For him, to your point, you should be aiming not to do too much manipulation within Power BI, but sometimes, or whatever the tool is, but sometimes it is necessary. So being able to take that, have a little bit of knowledge on the DAX language to be able to to be able to use within Power BI. There's an interesting point as well, and everyone would have seen it with Excel files, where at some stage there was an absolute guru who wrote an Excel file and then subsequently left. And so long as it's working, it's fine. But as soon as it's not, no one knows where to even start. So you've got to watch Power BI. You fall into exactly the same trap there. So I think keep it simple. Goes back to what do you need to see. You don't need to throw everything into that dashboard. So keep it simple, and yeah, always aim that there's people within the organization who feel comfortable to be able to make adjustments and to be able to troubleshoot when there's an issue.
I think, yeah, for me, it comes down to the maturity of the organization and the size of the organization. We've got a very wide audience online today. So some of you will have data teams and like data analysts and data science teams. If you have that, ideally you leave the connection to source systems and the data, the raw data, getting to somewhere for you to use to them. And then you as the finance team then take that data and do the calculations you need from that data and do the dashboards and reports that you need from that data. If you don't follow that process, you'll end up creating shadow IT and you'll create a new governance issue. So your numbers won't match the rest of the organization and you'll be the problem that you're trying to avoid in the first place. So don't do that. Okay, go talk to your data team if you don't have one. If you don't have a data team, sorry, if you do have one, go talk to them. If you don't have a data team, I think my suggestion would be to start with that in mind, that whatever you're doing will be the beginning of the data team in your organization. So start with that in mind and just keep an audit trail, like what finance professionals do very well anyway. Keep an audit trail of the documents, document everything, so that eventually if we need to change platforms or not, we can work that out. The 3 layers to distinguish, that's really important. One is what I'd call the data engineering layer of connecting systems and bringing the data in reliably and setting up a refresh cycle, whether it be daily or hourly or however frequently you need the data to refresh. That's where it's quite technical and quite data sciencey, or data engineering is the term. And you need a fairly decent skill set. As Greg said, there's no such thing as a simple integration. Then once the data is in one place, comes the calculations, right? And it could be as simple as what's the relationship between sales and profit, that calculation, or revenue minus expense equals profit, just that simple calculation, because that calculation doesn't sit anywhere. In a data file, there's just rows of data. There's no calculation, right? Or columns of data. There's no calculation. So you have to do those calculations yourself. And that a finance function can do if it's outside of like a SQL database or something. Now that's where it gets tricky. If you get large enough, your data team will force you to do the calculations inside a database, and then suddenly your finance skills aren't enough. You need to be able to write in some form of code, unfortunately. But you could do that in Excel or Power BI initially, just to start. And then the final layer is the dashboarding layer. So we've got the data engineering layer, the data calculation layer, and then the dashboarding and insights and reporting layer. And that finance team should definitely own. Like, in fact, most organizations will say the business unit owns their front end of the insights and everything and the story they want to tell. The data team will, at best, bring the data into one place for you to use. And secondly, they may help you with the calculation side of things, of building it in code for you. And then the dashboarding is up to you. That's usually how it works.
Yeah, and I might just add to that. Obviously, information, there's a degree of sensitivity with all data in an organization. So that data governance is a key element to make sure that the data is being seen and distributed to the right audience. So you wouldn't want HR sensitive data being open access to everyone, as an example. So I think if your data governance is well organized, and then you can create these access to the data set where different groups have access to it. They're sort of called self-serve data, and they can maybe then create their own dashboards, but from a given data set is really key. But ensuring that the right user access is set across your data function is really important as well. So I think for him, to your point, different size organizations have different resources internally. But data governance, where you do start using it, data governance is something to be very conscious of.
That's really useful to understand, and I think coming into something you both touched upon in that section around APIs, refreshing data. With about 5 minutes to go, we were talking previously offline around the concept of the faster you want the data, or the more real time, the exponential cost increases, was my understanding. So if you want a weekly refresh or a daily refresh, the cost differential is probably not much. But if you wanted a absolutely live, second by second cost or number coming through. My understanding from our conversation was effectively you are looking at very, very high cost to actually get that number. So it's effectively, if you want that, you've got to be really, really, you really, really need it. Is that right, Greg? Is that, am I?
Yeah, and probably, yeah, something that comes to mind, and it almost goes back to the 1951 Land Rover. Back in those days, large industrial chemical plants would invest huge amounts of money in their control systems, or Honeywell or those sorts of control systems that would allow monitoring of whatever it was they're monitoring in real time, versus your financial statements that would come out once a month, and you don't need your financial statements in real time. I think that concept still exists. Obviously, data has become easier to create and store and access. But the reality is, the more real time you need, the larger the data set is going to be, because you're refreshing. If you think about an electrical network, it's microseconds, and obviously that's system controls and everything that are using that data to make changes, versus something that weekly would be more than sufficient, or monthly would be more than sufficient. We did some work a couple of years ago with a fuel retailer who recognized that your fuel price compared to your competitors was really the key driver of volume. So very, very elastic decision for purchasing fuel. Now, once a week, their fuel team would look at what was coming ahead and make their decisions on fuel prices. The view was you could actually get to a point where you understand the controls, and you could be adjusting fuels on every 15 minutes across Australia. You get refreshed fuel price data. So you could build in tools into that regard to really optimize your demand and margin balance. They decided not to do that. They liked the weekly approach, and they decided that was more than sufficient. So it was a management decision to say, we know what's possible, but we're actually pretty comfortable with this weekly sort of fuel team getting together and setting pricing. And so that was I think a good example of, do you need to go down to that micro level?
I know for him, you're quite passionate about this as well.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think live and real time in technical world means very different to what we mean in the business world. And so even a 1 minute refresh versus a 1 second refresh is exponentially cost differential. However, once you get to daily and weekly, you're sort of at the same sort of price. It doesn't matter. So daily, weekly, I think we've got a finance team that we work with that have a daily refresh, but they've also got a manual refresh if they want to do it anytime they want it. So they put some transactions through. They don't want to wait for the overnight refresh. They just go in the back end and hit refresh, and it just pushes through that. That was the way we avoided the live, because when they started that conversation, it was like, oh, every time we put a journal entry through, we want that to come through the dashboard. And I was like, how often do you do that? Like once a week. I'm like, okay, well, can I just give you a manual button every time you do that? That'll do. And we just saved them a ton of money. Otherwise, we would have done something worth millions or worth hundreds of thousands of dollars for no reason.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. We've got about a minute to go, so I think I'll wrap up here. It's been a really good conversation. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. I'll throw to Greg quickly to close out. Where can people find you, Greg? We'll send around a pack so that everyone's got your email address, etc. But where can people find you generally?
Yeah, so obviously through either yourself, Nick, or for him, if you send my contact details through. But Forecast is the name of the business, and we're a small kind of specialist boutique provider of data and financial analysis. But more than happy to be contacted through for him or Nick.
That's great. Thank you very much. And for him, do you want to throw anything out? I know you're doing your AI ventures right now as well. So
Now we'll talk about AI and dashboarding and its impact in the next one, because we are moving to a world where you won't need to build your own dashboards. You can just ask questions and the dashboards will get created live in front of your eyes. But that doesn't change anything we've discussed today, which is the purpose of the dashboard.
Yeah. No, perfect. Thank you very much. That's it for the day, and appreciate everyone's attendance. Looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks all.